ZLC and variances.
Yes,
Stop.
don't leave yet. I've been urged by more than one person not to talk too long, so try to accommodate that. Just so that you know what I'm going to do, I have 4 categories, let's start with category number 1, which is the normal ZLC report. What happened at the last meeting and what's going to happen at the next ZLC meeting. By the way, ZLC for the new faces is Zoning Licensing and Construction Committee of the North End Waterfront Residents Association. I am the chair, and have been the chair for a long time only because there are no term limits. I would love to have someone join me, so whoever would like to be co-chair, please let me know, anytime, day or night. We did not have a ZLC meeting in December for 2 reasons. One, because the 4th Tuesday of the month when we usually have them was Christmas Eve. And the next one was New Year's Eve. And also, no one had asked to have an item put on the agenda. We have one item on the January 28th agenda, which I will prepare, it hasn't been prepared yet, which is 471 to 477 Hanover Street. And I walked down there today. It's the last building on the right. It's a pair of buildings, actually, just before the parking lot at the end of Hanover Street before you get to Commercial Street. And the proposal there is to change the occupancy of the existing building from 7 units to 6 units. That's interesting. Reducing the number of units. I emailed, when I saw that, I emailed Attorney Toscano for more details, and I don't have a reply yet, so that's all I'll have to tell you. The next general category is, I want to ask you, what should I do? Principally, the members of the Zoning Licensing and Construction Committee, which means people who come to the meetings. If you come to the meeting, you'll be a member. Sean, most recently, has been coming to meetings. Is there anyone else who comes to ZLC meetings? I guess you're the member. 27 Chief Street, an interesting background. It was voted to support a change legal occupancy from 5 residential units to 8 residential units at a newer meeting in 2018. It was also supported by the council, neighborhood council. When Attorney Toscano took it to the Board of Appeal, they denied it. And interesting, 2 community organizations, the only 2, supported it, the Board of Appeal denied it. With the help of Mary McGee, who gave me a link, I was able to look at the hearing. And the issues were, it had come to the Board of Appeal prior to that, so this would be the 3rd time. The earlier drawings hadn't been changed. There was a utility room which had access from the street, not from inside the building, and Anthony Pisani, the architect member of the board, didn't like that. And the chair of the board pointed out that raising the number of units was being done by halving, H-A-L-V-I-N-G, the existing units, making them smaller. So they denied it without prejudice, and under the rules, you can come back again after a year elapses, and that's what Attorney Toscano was doing, going back to the Board of Appeal with the same plans for the 3rd time. Now the question is, what do we do? If the Board of Appeal had denied them, and if we had voted to deny, we would say, you can't take 2 bites of the apple, we won't hear you again on the same plans. But we had voted to support. I know Dave Kubiak, I've discussed it with him, and I think Dave's approach is, well, more than a year has elapsed, there are new members of NURA, we have new information, we should take another look at it and take another vote. Okay, but does he have to go through ZLC again? The issues raised by the Board of Appeal were not issues that abutters or neighbors would be concerned about, so.
They may not be the same abutters.
But the,
Also, you don't know what kind of impacts there may have been to abutters from that building over the past year, too. Things may have changed.
what, okay. I'm asking what to do. Does everyone think that we should require them to go through the full procedure? Zoning licensing, construction committee meeting, and then a new vote?
Seems like they're gonna just get denied by the ZBA.
Could very well be.
So
Oh, yes, I have established that the
Didn't
plans.
you say, Victor, that the member who had been the chief objector is no longer on the board?
Yes, oh, you're quite right. Anthony Pisani, the architect member who had been on the board for 20 or 30 years, resigned, so he's not on the board anymore.
Okay, so
Yes,
there's the motivation.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But if they have to go before the Board of Appeals, in order to do that, they have to have gone through the neighborhood
Sure.
organizations, then it seems to me you should let them do that, otherwise they may get rejected at the Board of Appeals because they didn't go to the neighborhood.
Okay, so the full NURA procedure, ZLC meeting and NURA meeting, NURA vote. Okay.
Yeah.
I will so advise Anthony, and thank you that I didn't have to make the decision.
For anyone who's a new attendee to these meetings, you'll see that it's a very member-driven organization, and this is proof right here that it is. So for anyone who's new, that's one of the tenets that we have as an organization, makes us proud. So
Yes, we don't make decisions behind closed doors, like some governmental agencies that we know about. Okay, the third of the four items that I wanted to talk about is the breaking news that the zoning amendment on executive suites and short-term housing was adopted by the zoning commission. And since Ford is the expert on this item, would you like to explain what it's all about?
Sure, and I'll try to be brief because I don't want people to glaze over on this. But so when the city of Boston passed the ordinance that controlled short-term rentals, there were a couple of exception areas, and we were always a little worried about them because we thought, well, the clever developer is going to be able to figure out a way to game the system and use this loophole. And sure enough, there was a big one called executive suites. Executive suites is a definition of the zoning code, been around since 2008. It essentially is.
Do you want it?
No, I won't read it because it's like a bunch of gobbledygook. But essentially, what it's supposed to be is short-term housing for business executives. That's why they're called executive suites. Like if a GE executive is moving in here and they're looking for a house, but they're going to start the job immediately, they go into oftentimes executive suite rentals. And there are a couple of companies like Churchill. We have some here in the North End that operate executive suites that are legitimately, that's the purpose. Well, some of the folks that no longer could operate one-night fake hotels under the new city ordinance decided, let's just become executive suites. And it turns out you can become an executive suite as of right in huge swaths of the city, or you could before yesterday, in huge parts of the city, including all of Hanover Street. That's the reason that Frank DiPasquale, when he opened the Bricko Suites, did not need to come to us or go to the ZBA, because as of right, you can change executive occupancy to residential occupancy to executive suite occupancy. So, big loophole. Were people taking advantage of it? So we did a look at the mid-December numbers from Airbnb, and by our calculus, 20% of the listings had been registered. Bear in mind, on December 1st, the law was everyone, including historical listers, had to be registered and present a number. Only 20% had a number. 20% were using exemptions, including executive suite, to about 25%. So a larger number claiming exemptions than had actually registered. And then the rest, which is a huge number, were folks that were just purely illegal, fake registration numbers, all sorts of games being played. ISD is on that. That part of the pie is going to be closed down. But the part of the executive suite part, there was no no way that you could close that down because it was legal. So the city proposed an amendment to the zoning commission. Usually BRA puts zoning commission, catalyzes zoning changes, but this time the city did, specifically for this. And we had the vote yesterday. A lot of people showed up. I don't know if anyone from this room came to it, but we had mobilized most all of the neighborhood associations. I work with a lot of the other neighborhood associations as chair of the Alliance of Downtown Civic Organizations, so we had a lot of people from Chinatown, a lot of people from Back Bay. We've done press. Channel 25 had Karen Chen and some Chinatown residents who'd actually been displaced by executive suite, fake hotel players. And the good news is that the zoning commission, which is different than the zoning board of appeals, so it's very, very complicated to navigate through, but the zoning commission that makes decisions on zoning unanimously voted to adopt this change. And what that means is that there is no longer any portion of the city, at least according to city lawyers, where you can do an as-of-right conversion from residential to executive suite. But that has implications for ZLC, because what it means is it didn't solve the problem. It means everything has to go through neighborhood process, and everything's going to need to go to the ZBA. And Sonder, which is the largest, the largest operator of such one-night rentals under the executive suite label, some people call them fake hotels. Sonder is right now trying to get variances to operate some of these in Beacon Hill in forbidden use areas, and has become quite adept at overwhelming their neighborhood process and their ZLC. So, and we're seeing this in other neighborhoods too. There are probably 250 executive suite as-of-right conversions that were stopped by this amendment. They will all go through neighborhood process. And so NURA is going to have to keep your eyes open. We're going to need to make sure that we get alerted to when these things happen, which is going to be tough because we no longer have a neighborhood liaison for the time being. But hopefully someone will keep notifying us, and we need to make time to consider all of this. And we're just going to need to sort of buck up and make sure that we're catching the executive suite conversions. And we're making sure they go through our neighborhood process. So when I grimaced a little bit when you were talking about a third bite at the apple on one property, I mean, you may want to reserve a little bit of time for stuff like this, because it's going to be a big firehouse. And there are other exemptions that were not fixed yet, but we are still trying to fix them. One of them is the hospital stay exemption, where as long as you know someone who knows someone who has a contract for anything with a hospital, you can claim that exemption. It's not clear that ISD will ultimately allow you to keep it, but they're so overwhelmed that there are a huge number of people claiming that exemption. We haven't fixed that yet. That's not going to come through neighborhood process, but soon we hope we will fix that. But for now, executive suites, they're probably, as I said, there were 200 that were in the pipeline. There are another 250 behind those that we know are in the exemption that we've discovered in our scrape of the Airbnb website. So it could be that there are 500, and the North End share could be, I don't know, 50, maybe 75. So just be prepared for these.
Thank
Okay.
you, Flor.
Thank you. And the neighborhood process is required by virtue of the zoning amendment, but it would be a conditional use granted by the Board of Appeal. That is conditional throughout this. Well, yeah.
Well, there are forbidden uses.
Forbidden uses also.
Right.
Okay.
But what was formally allowed is now
Is now
conditional.
conditional.
What
Right,
was
so
conditional
I
stays
can
conditional.
feel that we're starting to
Okay.
lose our audience.
Okay.
So, the variance pieces, this is super important, but we should continue
Okay,
the
and
conversation kind of like in small
I'm feeling
bites.
that too, and I'm wondering whether we should take up zoning variances another evening.
Yeah.
I'll go drink with my husband right now. If you want.
Well,
Just kidding. Not really.
um,
Somebody else.
let me just say a couple of words and perhaps intrigue you to come back to talk about it another evening, which is the Board of Appeal has been acting for 50 years illegally. Now, wait a minute, Victor. Really? Illegal? Yes. The reason is that the zoning code requires specific findings to grant a variance. A variance is something to vary the restrictions in the zoning code. I first came across it in 1967, and they were doing it then. And they're doing it now. And it's not me saying it's illegal, it's the Superior Court saying it's illegal, because if the zoning board, the Board of Appeal grants a variance, and you, the abutter, have standing, which is something that I don't want to get into because it's arcane and complex, but anyway, if you get your foot in the door of the courtroom and don't get dismissed, the Superior Court will annul the act of the Board of Appeal in granting the variance, saying you did not conform to all the requirements that this memorandum sets out. How can it be that that happens? I don't know, but it has been happening. The interesting thing is, I thought about this yesterday and today. We like to say that, or we like to blame the BRA, and I'm certainly somebody who blames the BRA for a lot of things, for non-planning. But I think Mary Ann D'Amato, who worked on the zoning for the North End, right? Article 54 was adopted by the city in 1993. So at least there was a zoning code put into place, but the action of the BRA, of the Board of Appeal, continued. Now, I suppose the zoning code isn't an urban plan, so we could still complain that the BRA has not prepared an urban plan for the North End. But this bizarre routine of ignoring the legal requirements started more than 50 years ago and continues today. I think a conversation needs to be had at some point. Is there something about the need to focus on individual parcels that an overall zoning plan doesn't? And that there needs to be a mechanism to do that. I wonder what other cities have. That conversation I never hear, but sometime I'd like to have it. That's probably enough for tonight.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.